Felipe, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So you stepped into the role of CEO at GeoPark on June 1st, so not yet even through your first 6 months in the role, but as your tenure began, just what were your first impressions of the company from the inside, and how did you approach those early days of leadership, getting to understand where GeoPark has been and where it currently is now?
So I'd say that there's actually a couple things. One, GeoPark has been a company that I've admired for a very long time in terms of how they approach and how they conduct businesses, relationship with the communities, with their partners, actually dealing with the environment and everything else. So that's something that I've liked for a very long time. And then when I joined, I saw a very sort of committed team, people that wanted to do the right thing. But I also saw a company that needed a little bit of a reset. And that's what we did, in terms of saying there's two key things that need to happen. One, we need to protect and take care of what we have, the existing business. Point number one. And the second thing was we need to go back to growth, which is what we did when we announced the acquisitions in Argentina.
You've had tons of experience elsewhere. So how did that shape? I'm talking Shell, BP, most recently Ecopetrol. How did those experiences really shape your leadership style and shape how you want to help GeoPark grow into the future?
So it's one, I'd say that the first thing is understanding or acknowledging that relationships need to be respectful and need to be long-term. So I touch back on some of those relationships that I had for a very long time. And the other thing is just accepting as a leader that first, you don't have all the answers, that you need to be truthful to your leadership style, whatever that would be. There's some things that you want to do, some things that you don't want to replicate from other eventual role models. Sure. It's surrounding yourself with people that know more than you, basically in everything that you do. And when in need, raise your hand, and be truthful to your ulterior purpose in life, and that to me, it sounds probably very simple.
No, but it makes sense.
But I think it's helped, in terms of different roles, leadership roles that I've had over more than 30-something years in industry.
Absolutely. And so I want to speak real quick to just culture. And I think culture is often described as sort of this like invisible force that drives behavior. But I think more and more, it's increasingly becoming something that's very tangible and really a strategic asset for a lot of companies. How do you as CEO actively shape and protect that culture on a day-to-day basis so that it either remains a company strength or if it's not a company strength, could become one?
I think, first of all, the GeoPark has a very sort of strong culture of performance, delivery, and basically be truthful to their promises. So that's something that we need to build on. Having said that, I believe also that cultures need to be explicitly written down and discussed with the organization. So what we did, we conducted a company-large sort of survey, very, very simple survey. What are the things you like about the company in terms of cultures? What are the things we need to let go or stop doing? And what are the things that we should bring into the conversation? We brought the board, and they actually participated. And then the last thing we did, we brought a Aura, which is our AI agent for culture. So Aura is part of the team, and she's helping, or he's helping us develop the culture, and we should be launching that in the next few weeks or so.
That's very exciting. I like the use and the implementation of AI, something we'll also speak to obviously later in the conversation, because it's a technology that's influencing everything, as you know, regardless of the sector that one is in. And I think so much of what culture or how culture is influenced is obviously by the people. And throughout these first few months at GeoPark, I'm sure you've been able to travel around and meet GeoPark's people and meet the people that really make the company go, right? Those that are working firsthand in it. What have you learned from them and your experiences meeting them about, again, who GeoPark was, what GeoPark currently is now, and where GeoPark can go in the future?
Yeah, so the first thing that you observe is a company that has been agile and nimble, that has been very quick at implementing things. For example, technology, and you were talking about AI, and we can probably touch on that a bit more. A company that's where people are very honored and proud of what they do, Also, I think a company that's humble in terms of how they present themselves, has good partnerships, has good recognition from the communities in which we operate. And that's sort of what I saw. But I think what we needed as a company is also to regain that sort of aspiration and vision to grow again, to be able to say, we're here. How do we take ourselves to the next level and what's required behind that?
So let's talk about AI, just since we were on the topic. Most companies across, again, various sectors are using it, whether that's using it for just back-end operations to increase efficiency, or that could be as large as, wow, this technology is really revolutionizing not only what the company is doing, but what the industry is doing. And sometimes you have businesses that sort of fall into one spectrum or the other, or some that just sort of fall in the middle. From increasing speed, efficiency, safety, whatever may be the case, you obviously mentioned Aura before, but how is GeoPark using AI to get ahead and to find that growth that you speak to?
I'd start with safety. It's the first thing. So we actually use enhanced visual recognition, and we have it in the drilling rigs. So with those cameras and AI, we can detect potentially unsafe acts and basically prevent an accident from happening. And over the time that we've actually deployed the technology, we've stopped north of 800 unsafe or potentially unsafe actions. So that's good, and people start getting used to that and say, look, this is another tool that I can help. Or we can use it we're using it in our drilling operations, and we've drilled north of 200 wells in the field, and we have 2 rigs running continuously. So we can, in some parts of the reservoirs, we can use AI to basically guide where the well will go. And it's already showing some improvements, significant improvements in terms of rates of penetrations and speed and savings that ultimately hit the bottom end, or the bottom line, sorry. And then there's things like, not necessarily AI, but things like nanotechnology in terms of drilling fluids, or machine learning in terms of the rigs themselves, or rigs that can basically move, they can walk, and you can position them in different places. So there's a lot of technology in the operations themselves, efficiencies around use of electricity. Our fields are all electrified, which is good for emissions as well. But it provides some opportunities in terms of technology. And then there's what I would describe as, how do we ensure that we can make the life of people in the office, in the organization, and in the field better? How can we improve the way in which they work and make it easier? So there's 350 employees in the company, and we have 1,100 agents with AI created by the people. So we've been very open in terms of letting them use technology, and things like Aura that we discussed for culture, or things like them being part of the teams in different areas. Things like using seismic data and then creating data with AI that can help us better define, or the petrophysics, so the technical side of the subsurface, to try to be more accurate in terms of where we go. So there's lots of things that we're using it, and I think we haven't even, we're scratching the surface, I would say,
I think that's the fascinating thing about AI as a whole, or at least the thing that I find the most fascinating, is over the last, say, 2 or 3 years, and I know AI has been around for longer than 2 or 3 years, but since we really had that big, aha moment the world did with AI, since I think it was 2022, there have already been hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of use cases found. And the fascinating thing is that there could be millions more use cases that have yet to be found, because the technology is continuously advancing. And what we see AI as today doesn't necessarily mean it's what AI is going to be tomorrow, or the next week, or the next month, or the next year, right? So the fascinating thing for me is that it's constantly evolving. And at least for me as a podcaster, right, I'm trying to implement it as best that I can too, right? Knowing that it's going to keep moving and I have to stay ahead of it, or at least have to stay on par with the movement. Being in the energy sector for so long, at those various places that I mentioned, Shell, BP, Ecopetrol, et cetera, now with GeoPark, how have you just seen the sector as a whole adjust to AI and change with this sort of new evolution of technology and the constant advancement of it?
I'd say there's different speeds in terms of actually embracing AI. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that are cautious and saying, I need to see it. At least in our case, what we've done is we've had at the C-suite or the leadership level training sessions and workshops where we all sit down with our computers and do stuff, you know, and they're very tailored to ourselves. We have a very capable group of people in the what would be the IT and the CIO departments. And it creates a difference, you know, when you actually you jump in the water and say, I need to practice now. So I think that helps. And I think, as I tell people, probably a bit jokingly, when I started in college, we didn't have personal computers. You know, I had to punch cards and take my Fortran programs to a very, very large computing facility. Our cell phones have more capacity than those buildings did in the past. So it's just saying, look, this is here. It's not the enemy. It's not even just a tool. It needs to be part of how you conduct your business. And at the end of the day, you need to make AI part of your teams.
Yeah. I mean, I never sat in a computing facility. I'm 29 years old. When I was growing up, we had a computer class, though, which, you know, we all got our own big, you know, Dell lab desk or desktop, I think, at the time. And so I never sat in a computing facility, but I do remember those days. And like you said, I mean, our cell phones nowadays have had, you know, 100 times more capacity than any of those computers probably ever did. But to that point of AI changing the sector, it is a sector that's, I think, undergoing transformation, right? There's pressure to innovate, pressure to decarbonize, among other things. How do you see GeoPark positioning itself in this evolving energy landscape that, like AI, is constantly moving?
So I'd say that the first thing is that demand for energy overall will continue to grow in the world. You know, and in that sense, I'm convinced that all the forms of energy are valid. The enemy is not the form of energy. The enemy, for example, could be the emissions that you have or the carbon footprint. As a company, we have a very, very low carbon footprint, you know, that it's below 10 kilograms of CO2 per barrel. It's world class. It's very, very low. So how do we continue to advance in that space? And I was saying we have electrified our operations. We have solar energy as well. We're going to biomass. So there's a few things that we would do. We need to understand how to better manage the water that we produce. For every barrel of oil, we produce 10 barrels of water. How do you actually save energy in doing that in the treatment, transportation, and everything else? So I see ourselves as a company that will continue to be part of that ecosystem. And now, not only in Colombia, but also in Argentina with the new acquisition. So I think that's part of how we see GeoPark. And then the other thing, which I haven't mentioned, which is great, and being here where we are, New York Stock Exchange, all of our employees are shareholders of the company. And that creates, I think, a sense of commitment and ownership. That's probably happens in some other companies, but I think that's very particular to GeoPark.
Yeah, no, I think it brings the employees closer to the company for sure. So I applaud GeoPark and I applaud yourself for that. Now, so GeoPark has a strong portfolio of assets across Latin America. I know part of the strategy of growth moving forward, as you mentioned earlier, and as we talked a little bit about, was protecting what you currently have and then finding those new opportunities for growth. How do you balance those two areas, right? Ensuring that your current assets are taken care of while also actively innovating and searching for those new opportunities, because you got to make sure you can't prioritize one and not the other and let the other one slip. How do you make sure you have a firm focus on both?
As everything in life, Lance, I think that it's better when you have more ideas than money. Sure. Because then you need to choose. You need to prioritize. You need to be very disciplined. So being very disciplined in terms of the strategy and the direction, the investment plans, deployment or allocation of capital is fundamental. to what we do. So we will continue to do that. And in the case of our recent investment in Argentina, or entry into Argentina, unconventionals in Neuquén and formation that's called Vaca Muerta, it's an area that's experiencing an investment of north of $10 billion per year. Production has grown 5 or 6-fold in the last few years. It's producing north of 500,000 barrels a day from fracking. And in gas, it's 3.5 BCF per day. So it's an industry, or it's an area where the oil and gas industry can actually develop a lot of activity. It's very friendly in that case. And I would say that related to the U.S., it's the one place in this hemisphere where things have been done well in terms of unconventionals. The U.S., and I've had some prior experience in the Permian specifically, and then Argentina. So we see ourselves as an investor, an operator, and we'll grow from this position north of, it's just a little bit north of 12,000 acres. We're going to take current production from 2,000 barrels to 20,000 barrels per day over the next 3 years. Overall, an investment of $1 billion, which is significant for a company like us. But it allows us, if you will, to, in the course of the next 3 years, basically double the size of the company if you use EBITDA or EBITDA as a measure, and take the production from 28,000 barrels to 45,000 barrels, 46,000 barrels. So it allows us that opportunity. And at the end of the day, back to our shareholders, we need to ensure that we can return to them value.
Sure. So let's talk about Vaca Muerta.
Sure.
You mentioned a whole host of reasons for why it's friendly to the company, why it makes sense to now start to expand into that area. But why was now the right time, right? Like, why was it the right asset for GeoPark to get involved when, could have been a year ago, could have been 2 years ago? Why was now the right time for GeoPark to get involved in Vaca Muerta?
So the company has been trying to get into the unconventionals in Argentina. And I'll mention something that probably most people don't know. But the company actually was created and born in Argentina. It was 23 years ago in a province in Patagonia, which is further south, Santa Cruz. That's where it started with conventional operations. So we're back in the country, and it's great. We have this area where we can now start developing the facilities, drill the wells, some 55 wells. We want to drill in the two blocks, 2 concessions, and get the production to 20,000 barrels per day. But I'd say there's additional things that have happened, and we will always remain very disciplined, and focused. But a lot of people have approached us and said, look, Felipe and GeoPark, we want to do things with you.
Sure.
We're a company, you're a company that we trust, that has done the things right historically. So there are some more things that we'll continue to assess, but we'll do, if they are the right thing, we'll do them. And then the longer term shot is, if unconventionals are allowed and the door is open back in Colombia, we can bring the expertise from Argentina back into Colombia and then be hopefully an unconventional player. So that's sort of the strategic direction that we see in this. And again, Vaca Muerta, probably like the Permian in the U.S., and the province of Neuquén, specifically in Argentina, is an area where there's a lot of activity, a lot of expertise, a lot of great talent, and a lot of action, in terms of developing these resources.
And so the acquisition, obviously now complete, teams already on the ground, ready to deliver. What are the immediate priorities for GeoPark in Vaca Muerta? Is it the drilling of the wells that you mentioned before? Like, what are the first steps to really, as you said, going from, I think you said 2,000 barrels to 20,000 barrels? Yeah. How do you do that?
So the first thing was basically receiving the operation from Pluspetrol, and that was seamless. Some people transferred from Pluspetrol to our company. We had some teams in the ground. We brought some other people, so we're consolidating the team. That's point number one, and ensuring that we can continue to operate safely, responsibly, and in a way that's profitable. We've already started intervening some of the wells to look at artificial lift systems, which is how can I improve what we have in terms of productivity. Then the third thing will be around going back and drilling some of the wells that have not been finished. So getting them to total depth, TD, ensuring that we can continue or finalize drilling operations, then frack the wells. And then probably in the next 9 to 12 months, we'll start drilling operations and we'll have one rig running. In parallel to that or simultaneously, we'll be doing all the permitting, all the consultations to ensure, and the engineering to ensure that we can provide the facilities, the pipelines, and everything else. So lots of activity in the next 3 years, $500 to $600 million of investment.
So you mentioned, obviously, and we've been talking about Vaca Muerta and its importance. You mentioned earlier GeoPark as a whole, starting in Argentina in Santa Cruz in 2002. What makes the country such a compelling place to invest and operate in right now, especially given the complexities of the energy landscape in Latin America?
So I think if you look at the region overall, there's a few countries that are very appealing in terms of oil and gas. Guyana, offshore, very, very large companies, large discoveries. Brazil, offshore. You need a lot of expertise. We're not an offshore operator. And Vaca Muerta, through the unconventionals in Argentina, is a country where, first, as I said, when I met with the governor, he said, look, you're welcome. The door is open. And we said, we want to come in, we want to invest, we want to operate. And, the industry, I think, is used to uncertainty, and changes, volatility. We can deal with that. We have a long-term view on the investments that we do. And in that sense, I think Vaca Muerta provides a great ecosystem in terms of the companies, the technology that's being used, the service providers, where we can go and not only develop a lot of those competencies. We already have a lot of people in the team with a lot of experience in unconventional development, but broaden the experience, the competencies, and then be a successful operator. So I think it's a long-term game. These concessions, some of them or one of them is until 2057. The other one is until 2060.
Wow.
So there's still some time, but we'll make sure that we do things in a way that's disciplined and that creates value.
So, Felipe, as we begin to wrap up our conversation, we've obviously been talking about Vaca Muerta. We're talking about the importance of Argentina and everything that GeoPark has going on there. As you step into the role of CEO, and of course, as we talked about earlier in our conversation, still relatively new to the role here at GeoPark, stepping into the role of CEO, you're now at the helm of a company with a strong foundation and obviously a big regional presence. When you look ahead just 5 or 10 years down the line, what is your vision for what GeoPark will become? We talked about going after new opportunities. You talked about how there are a lot of people coming to you with investment ideas and opportunities to come. So in your vision, if you could predict out 5-10 years, right, what does GeoPark look like when we talk in 2030?
And this is based on a lot of technical work that we've done with the teams, and kudos to them. They've done a great job in terms of understanding the assets and how can we maximize the value from the assets. So 3 or 4 years, I see the company doubling its size in terms of production, in terms of generation of EBITDA. We'll need to actually deploy a lot of CapEx. Cash flow generation is going to be tight. But, in that space, we're growing. Yeah. So I think directionally, first is a company that's growing. 2028, roughly, so it's a few years from now. But then onwards, we're already seeing what we described as a vision. Can we take that to the next level? And I think the answer is yes. Given where we are, given the assets that we have, the people that we have, and I think also the track record, reputation, and as I mentioned before, people approaching us and saying, we'd love to do things with you. You're a company we want to partner with. And as I said, relationships need to be respectful and trustful, and long-term relationships as well. So that's where I see the company.
Great. Well, Felipe, I appreciate you joining us. I wish you the best of luck as your tenure as CEO continues, and thank you so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks very much.